courtroom was crowded. People filled every bench, every seat, and still many stood against the wooden walls, pressing their bodies close together. The air was heavy, almost choking, as if the room itself knew something unusual was about to happen. Whispers floated across the hall like restless ghosts, rising and falling, mixing with the squeak of shoes and the rustle of papers. The sound was not loud, but it was alive like the heartbeat of the crowd. In the center of it all stood a young black woman. She was in chains. Her wrists were bound tightly, and the iron links clinked when she moved the slightest bit, yet she did not struggle. She did not fight. She stood still, quiet, her posture tall and straight, her eyes calm but unreadable. The cop beside her gripped her arm as if she was the most dangerous criminal in the city. His hand was rough, fingers digging into her sleeve, his jaw set hard. His eyes darted around the courtroom, scanning the crowd, but every few seconds, they returned to her face. There was a strange unease in him, as if he himself wasn't sure why he held her so tightly. Everyone watched. Everyone whispered, "Who is she?" A woman asked in a low, hurried voice from the back row. "I heard she was caught breaking the law," another replied. No, a man interrupted. "She insulted the court. I think she shouted at the judge last week." "That can't be true," someone else muttered. "Look at her. She doesn't even look afraid." It was true. The young woman did not look afraid. If anything, her face was calm, too calm. Her dark eyes scanned the crowd for a brief second, then returned to the front. She stood as if she had been here before, as if the wooden benches, the high ceiling, the cold marble floor, and even the great seal of justice behind the judges, all of it, were familiar to her. The crowd didn't understand. How could someone in chains look so unshaken? The judge finally entered. His black robe swayed as he climbed up the steps and sat on the high chair. He was an older man with lines on his face, lines that came not only from age but from years of carrying heavy power. He adjusted his glasses, glanced down at the papers before him, and then at the woman in chains. His expression was stern, but his eyes revealed something else, a flicker of discomfort, maybe even recognition. The prosecutor rose. He was a tall man with a sharp suit and a sharper tongue. He cleared his throat and said loudly, "Your Honor, this woman stands before you today because she has shown no respect for the law. She has disobeyed, she has disrupted, and she has before he could continue. The young woman lifted her head slightly. She did not speak, not a single word. She only looked at him. And in that single look, the prosecutor stumbled. Words faltered for just a second, and he had to glance back at his papers. The courtroom noticed. The whispers grew louder. The cop beside her tightened his grip. He seemed annoyed, maybe even nervous. He pressed her arm harder, as if trying to remind her of her place. Gosh. The chains rattled again, their metallic sound echoing in the silent hall. But she still stood calm. Not a flinch, not a word, not even a sigh. The prosecutor, regaining his voice, continued with more force. She must face punishment. If we allow this behavior, if we allow people like her to mock the system, then what will remain of justice? Nothing, Your Honor. Absolutely nothing. Judge nodded slowly, but his eyes kept returning to the woman. Something about her presence disturbed him. He lifted his gavel but hesitated before striking it. The pause was so long that the crowd noticed. The whispers grew even more restless. "Why doesn't she defend herself?" a man whispered. "Maybe she has nothing to say," a woman answered. "No," another voice cut in. "Look at her eyes. She knows something. She knows more than we do." The atmosphere thickened. It was as if the room itself leaned closer, waiting, holding its breath. Suddenly, the door at the side of the courtroom opened. A clerk rushed inside, holding a sealed envelope. The steps were hurried, his face pale. He went straight to the judge and whispered in his ear. The judge's expression changed instantly. His eyes widened slightly and his hand froze above the gavel. The woman in chains did not move. But for the first time, a small, mysterious smile appeared at the corner of her lips. It was not a smile of joy. It was not a smile of arrogance. It was something else, calm, knowing, dangerous in its silence. The crowd saw it. The whispers turned into gasps. What is happening? Why does the judge look so shocked? What's in that letter? The cop holding her arm didn't understand any of it. He only felt a shiver run down his spine. But he shook his head, refusing to believe the unease. He gripped her harder, as if the chains in his hand could control whatever storm was hidden inside this woman. But deep down, he felt it. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And as the judge slowly lowered the letter, his trembling hand placed it on the desk, the entire courtroom leaned forward, waiting. The woman finally lifted her head fully, her voice low but clear, cutting through. The whispers, like a blade. "Are you sure you know who I am?" she asked. The words were simple, but they carried weight. They carried fire. The courtroom froze. The prosecutor stopped breathing for a second. The judge's lips parted, but no words came. The jury looked at one another, wide-eyed, uncertain of what they had just heard. The cop swallowed hard. His grip loosened for the first time, and the crowd, every man, woman and child, sat in stunned silence. Nobody knew what she meant. Nobody knew who she truly was. But everyone felt that this was not an ordinary trial. This was something else, something bigger. The courtroom was no longer the same after those words. "Are you sure you know who I am?" They hung in the air like smoke, drifting into every corner, into every ear, into every beating heart. The sound was soft, but the meaning was heavy. The young woman's voice was steady, yet it carried something that shook the entire room. The silence that followed was unbearable. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder, marking every second like a drum of suspense. The cop's fingers, which had been gripping her arm with such force, began to tremble. He didn't want to admit it, didn't want anyone to see. But deep down, he felt a chill crawl across his skin. For the first time, he loosened his hold not much, but enough for her to notice. The young woman turned her calm eyes toward him. She did not smile. She did not frown. She only looked at him, and that look was enough to make him shift his stance, as if trying to hide his fear. The judge cleared his throat. His voice shook slightly as he spoke. "Order in the court," he said, though the words lacked strength. He struck his gavel once, but even that sound seemed weak. It's like a cracked bell. The prosecutor, who had been so confident a moment earlier, now felt his throat dry. He forced himself to speak louder than necessary, as if volume could cover his unease. "Your Honor, this is nothing but an attempt to create drama. The accused is mocking the court with her silence and her games. I demand," but he stopped. The judge was not looking at him. The judge was looking at the sealed envelope on his desk. His eyes stayed on it, his hand hovering just above it. As if the paper itself carried a secret too dangerous to reveal, the prosecutor swallowed. His confidence cracked. He sat down slowly, his sharp tongue suddenly silent. The crowd could no longer contain itself. The whispers turned into a storm. What does she mean? Why is the judge so nervous? Do they know her? She's someone important? The sound grew until it was louder than the gavel. The judge slammed it again, harder this time. "Order," he shouted. His voice carried more force, but his eyes betrayed fear. The woman in chains did not move. Her calm remained unbroken. She simply let the noise wash over her like waves against a rock. Then finally, she spoke again. Her words were slower this time, each one falling with the weight of a hammer. "You dragged me here in chains. You called me guilty before the trial even began. But not one of you has asked the most important question." The room leaned closer. Her voice lowered, but it was still clear. "Do you even know who sits in judgment today?" The words confused. The crowd murmurs spread again. Some thought she was mad. Others thought she was mocking the court. But only a few felt the truth hidden inside her voice. The cop tugged her arm roughly. "Enough," he hissed under his breath. But even as he said it, he could not meet her eyes. The judge raised his trembling hand. "The accused will remain silent until spoken to," he declared, but the strength in his voice was gone. She turned, her head slightly toward him, and for the first time she smiled, not wide, not arrogant, but a calm, mysterious curve of her lips. The judge froze. That smile, it was familiar. But how? From where? His hand gripped the gavel tighter, his knuckles white. The clerk still stood near him, waiting, the sealed envelope in his hand. The judge had not yet opened it, though it burned like fire on his desk. The clerk shifted uneasily, glancing at the woman, then at the judge. He wanted to speak, but fear held his tongue. The jury exchanged nervous glances. Some leaned closer to one another, whispering quickly, their eyes never leaving the woman. Others sat stiff and straight, too afraid to move. The atmosphere thickened until every breath was heavy. The woman finally broke the silence again. Her chains rattled as "You think these chains define me?" she said softly. "But you will soon realize they mean nothing." The cop yanked her arm, angry now. "Quiet," he barked. His voice echoed, but it cracked at the end, betraying his nerves. The crowd gasped. The judge's eyes snapped toward the cop. For a moment, it looked as though he would scold him. Then he stopped himself, his lips pressed tight, his gaze falling back to the woman. The prosecutor leaned forward again, desperate to regain control. "This is madness," he said, his voice high and sharp. "Your Honor, you must put an end to this nonsense." This woman, as he didn't finish. The woman's eyes shifted to him again. It was just a look, a single, calm look. But the prosecutor stopped mid-sentence. His words died in his throat. His face went pale, as if he had seen something in those eyes that no one else could. He cleared his throat, stumbled on his words, and sat back down, avoiding her gaze completely. The courtroom grew louder. The storm of whispers returned, stronger than before. Why is he afraid? Why won't anyone speak against her? Who is she really? The judge finally lifted the envelope. His hand shook as he broke the seal. The tearing of paper echoed in the silent courtroom. Every eye watched him as he unfolded the document. His eyes scanned the page, and then they widened. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. His hand trembled so badly that the paper almost slipped from his grasp. The crowd erupted. People stood from their seats, straining to see, demanding answers. The gavel slammed down again and again, but it could not silence them. The young woman simply stood there, still in chains, her calm unbroken. That faint smile returned, the same smile that seemed to know a truth the rest of them were blind to. The judge finally spoke, his voice breaking. "This cannot be." The words barely left his lips, but the room heard them. The prosecutor jumped up. "What is it, Your Honor? What does it say?" The judge did not answer. He only stared at the woman. His hands trembled. His lips moved, but no words came. The cop turned to him, confused, his grip on the woman weaker now than ever. The woman raised her chin slightly. Her voice was calm, almost kind. "You see it now, don't you?" she said softly. The judge could not reply. His silence spoke louder than any words, and in that silence, the courtroom changed forever. The paper in the judge's hand shook so violently that it was a wonder it didn't tear in half. His lips trembled, as though he wanted to speak, but his tongue refused. His eyes darted from the document to the woman in chains, then back again. The courtroom had fallen into chaos. People rose from their seats, leaning forward, whispering, arguing, gasping. The gavel slammed against the desk again and again, but the sound was weak against the rising storm of voices. The cop holding the woman looked from the judge to her. His grip had already loosened without him realizing. The woman noticed, but she did not move away. She stood still, letting him hold her, though her presence felt stronger than any chain or hand. The prosecutor's patience finally snapped. He slammed his hand on the table. "Your Honor, enough of this. What does the letter say? This courtroom demands an answer." His voice was loud, commanding, but inside he was trembling. The judge slowly raised his head. His eyes were wet with sweat, his face pale. He looked at the prosecutor, then at the crowd, and finally at the woman. His lips parted. And for the first time since the trial began, his voice carried no authority. This woman," he whispered. "She is not what you think she is." The words silenced the room instantly. Every whisper stopped. Every head turned toward the woman again. The prosecutor frowned. "What do you mean? She was brought here too." "No." The judge's voice cracked. He struck the gavel, but it was more a cry than a command. "No. She. His voice broke again. He could not finish. The woman lowered her head, as if allowing him to struggle. She did not interrupt. She waited, her calm eyes never leaving his face. The clerk, still standing near the bench, shifted nervously. He had seen the papers, too. He wanted to speak, to reveal what he knew, but fear tied his tongue. The prosecutor, refusing to be silenced, snatched the paper from the judge's hand. Gasps filled the room, unfolded it quickly and scanned the words. The color drained from his face. He froze, exactly like the judge had. His lips trembled, his breathing shallow. He stumbled back a step, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What is it?" someone from the crowd shouted. "Tell us." The prosecutor did not answer. His eyes, wide and filled with disbelief, lifted slowly toward the woman. He shook his head as though refusing to accept what he had read. The whispers returned, louder than before. The jury leaned toward one another, desperate for answers. The crowd's voices overlapped until the room roared like a storm. The judge struck his gavel over and over. "Order! I demand order!" But the sound was drowned. The cop tightened his grip again, but this time not out of confidence, out of fear. His hands were clammy, his breath short. He leaned closer to the woman and muttered, "What? What are you?" The woman finally raised her head fully. Her eyes, sharp and steady, swept across the courtroom.
"Oh."
She spoke slowly, so that every word echoed. "I am not the prisoner you believe me to be, and soon. Every one of you will understand why." The words hit like thunder. The crowd gasped again. The prosecutor dropped the paper onto the desk, his hands shaking. He looked at the judge helplessly, as though begging for guidance. The judge leaned back in his chair, exhausted, sweat dripping down his face. He rubbed his forehead with his trembling hand. For the first time in his career, he looked like a man defeated. The cop whispered again, harsher this time, "Stop playing games." "Who are you?" The woman turned her head slowly, her chains rattling, and looked him in the eyes. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried weight. "You'll know soon enough." The cop shuddered and quickly looked away. The crowd was no longer whispering, they were shouting. The noise filled the chamber. "She's lying. No, it's true. Look at the judge. What's in that paper? Tell us, this is not justice, this is madness." The judge tried once more. "Silence," he roared. His gavel slammed so hard that the wood cracked. The sound echoed, and for a brief moment the room quieted. His voice shook as he spoke. This court will take a short recess." But before he could strike the gavel again, the woman's voice cut through. "There will be no recess." The words were calm, but they carried a force greater than the gavel. Everyone froze. Even the judge stopped mid-motion, staring at her in disbelief. The cop tightened his grip again, angry at her defiance. "You don't give orders here," he hissed. The woman turned toward him. For the first time, she spoke his name. "Officer Daniels." He froze. She had never been introduced. No one had spoken his name aloud, but she knew it. How do you?" His voice cracked. She cut him off, her calm voice piercing the silence. "I know more about you than you know about yourself." Gasps rippled through the crowd again. Officer Daniels pulled back, his face pale, his grip weaker than ever. The judge stood slowly, his eyes fixed on her. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as though the words were too heavy to speak. Finally, he whispered, "It's true, isn't it?" The woman's smile returned soft, mysterious, unshakable, and in that moment, the entire courtroom understood one thing. The chains around her wrists did not make her powerless. They made her unstoppable. The silence in the courtroom was no longer the silence of discipline. It was the silence of fear. The crowd that once whispered and shouted now sat frozen, eyes wide, breath shallow. The air itself felt heavier, as though the walls of the room were leaning inward, pressing down on everyone inside. The woman in chains had spoken the officer's name. No one had introduced him. No one had said it aloud, yet she knew it. And she had said it with such calm certainty that it felt like a blade sliding across his chest. Officer Daniels stepped back, his hand trembling. He had held her so firmly before, but now he looked at his own fingers as though they betrayed him. He swallowed hard, sweat shining on his forehead. How? How do you know me? He whispered again, his voice too small for a man in uniform. The woman didn't answer him directly. Instead, she turned her eyes to the judge. Her gaze was steady, her lips curved into that same faint, unsettling smile. You see it, don't you? She asked softly. The judge gripped the edge of his bench. His knuckles were white, his face pale, his lips trembled, but he could not speak. His eyes darted toward the paper on his desk, then back to her, then back again. As if the truth written there burned into his mind, the prosecutor rose suddenly, slamming his hand on the table. His voice shook, but he forced it louder to cover his fear. This is manipulation, he shouted. She's playing tricks. She is dangerous, Your Honor. She must be silenced before she poisons this courtroom with her lies. But the words rang hollow. No one in the room believed him. It's not after the way his face had drained when he read the paper. It's not after the way the judge trembled. It's not after the way Officer Daniels shook like a child. The jury exchanged nervous glances, and some leaned closer. Together, whispering quickly, while others sat stiff and frozen, too afraid to move, the crowd murmured again, their voices low but tense. She knows him. What's in that paper? Why is the judge afraid of her? The noise rose higher and higher, and the judge slammed his gavel down. The woman finally lifted her bound hands. The chains clinked softly, but even that sound seemed to hush the crowd. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. You want to silence me? She said, her eyes on the prosecutor. But how will you silence? The truth? The prosecutor's face turned red. He opened his mouth to argue, but when her eyes met his words died. He sat down slowly, like a man pushed back into his seat by an invisible force. The judge finally stood. His legs shook slightly, but he rose anyway, his robe swaying around him. He looked at the crowd, then at the woman. This court. Now recess, he said firmly. But the woman shook her head. Her voice was soft, but it cut through the air like thunder. No, Judge, there will be no recess. Not today, the room gasped. The judge froze, his gavel still raised. His face turned white, his lips trembling. He opened his mouth to scold her, but no words came. It was as if she had spoken with more authority than him. The cop tried to step forward, his voice breaking. That's enough. The woman's eyes turned to him again, and once more she spoke his name. Daniels. He froze, his chest tightened. He tried to take another step, but his legs felt heavy, as though chained to the floor. She said simply, and without realizing it, he obeyed. Sank into the nearest bench, his face pale, his hands trembling on his knees. The crowd erupted again, louder than before. The room was filled with disbelief, shock, and fear. She gave him an order, and he obeyed. What is happening? The jury looked terrified now, their eyes darting between one another, sure if they should stay or flee. The judge clutched the edge of his desk, his hands shaking so hard that the papers on it slid to the floor. He leaned forward, his voice low and broken. Who are you? The woman tilted her head, her eyes steady, her lips still curved in that faint, mysterious smile. You already know, she said softly. The crowd gasped again. The judge's body trembled visibly now. He looked down at the paper once more, then back at her. His lips moved as though repeating silent words, but he didn't dare say them aloud. The prosecutor leapt up again, desperate to break the tension. His voice cracked as he shouted, This is an outrage. This is witchcraft. Lies. Your Honor, you cannot let her. But before he could finish, the woman's voice rose above his. Calm, clear, powerful, silence. The word echoed through the courtroom like a command, and the prosecutor fell silent. His lips moved, but no sound came out. "Da!" His eyes widened in horror as he realized he could not speak. His throat worked, but no voice followed. He clutched his neck, gasping, his face turning red. The crowd screamed. The jury leapt from their seats. Some backed away in terror, others covered their mouths, too shocked to breathe. The judge staggered back, his gavel dropping from his hand. Clattering onto the floor, the woman stood tall in her chains. Her eyes swept across the room, and the silence returned not from the gavel, not from the judge, but from her. The calm in her voice was colder now. "You dragged me here in chains," she said slowly. "You called me guilty without knowing the truth. But now the truth stands before you, and you cannot escape it." The judge whispered again, barely audible. "It's true. It's all true." The prosecutor fell to his knees, still clutching, his throat tears streaming down his face as he struggled to breathe. The cop sat frozen, unable to move, his eyes wide with terror, and the crowd stared at the woman as if they were looking at something far greater than a prisoner, something they could not yet understand. And for the first time, the courtroom no longer felt like a place of judgment. It felt like a place of revelation. The air in the courtroom was no longer ordinary air. It was heavy, thick, and sharp, as if every breath cut into the lungs. People were not just watching a trial anymore. They were witnessing something beyond their understanding. The prosecutor still knelt on the floor, clutching his throat. His lips moved, but no sound came. His eyes bulged, desperate for words that would not come. He gasped, his face red, his pride shattered. The cop officer, Daniels, sat on the bench where she had commanded him to sit. His uniform looked smaller on him now. The strength he carried earlier had melted away. His fingers tapped nervously against his knees, but he could not bring himself to stand again. The judge leaned forward, his body shaking. His gavel lay forgotten on the ground. His eyes were locked on the woman in chains, but those eyes no longer carried authority. They carried fear mixed with something else. Recognition. The crowd sat frozen, every mouth shut, every whisper buried. They stared at the woman who still stood tall in the center of the room, her wrists bound, her chains gleaming under the dim light. She raised her head, her calm gaze sweeping across the room. "You thought I came here as a prisoner?" she said softly, her voice steady, clear, unhurried. "But you were wrong. I came here to remind you who truly holds judgment." The silence was suffocating. Even the walls seemed to lean closer, listening. The judge finally found his voice, though it cracked with fear. This is impossible. You cannot be who I think you are." Her faint smile deepened. "And yet you already know." His hands trembled on the desk. His lips moved again, but the words did not come. He looked at the fallen paper on the floor, the same paper that had stolen the color from his face. Officer Daniels leaned forward suddenly, his voice trembling. What does that paper say?" His question was not only for the judge, it was for everyone. The crowd leaned forward too. Their eyes darted between the judge, the prosecutor, and the woman. They wanted the truth. They demanded it. The judge shook his head, sweat dripping down his temples. His hand reached for the paper but stopped midway, as if touching it again would burn him. The woman spoke before he could. "Tell them," she said simply. The judge froze. Her voice was not loud, but it carried more power than his gavel ever. "Head, tell them what you read," she repeated. The judge's breathing quickened. His chest rose and fell like a man under pressure. He tried to shake his head again, but her eyes were locked onto his, and he could not look away. Finally, his lips parted. His voice came out in a whisper, but it carried across the room like a shout. She, his throat tightened. She was never the accused. Gasps filled the courtroom. What? What does that mean? Then why is she in chains? The crowd roared again, but the judge lifted his trembling hand, begging for silence. She. His voice cracked. His hand pressed against his forehead, as though he couldn't believe his own words. She is the appointed judge of this court. The room exploded. People stood up, shouting, arguing, screaming. The sound was deafening. Some pointed at her in disbelief. Others looked at one another as though the world had turned upside down. She's the judge. How can that be true? Then why was she arrested? What's happening here? The gavel was gone. The order was gone, and the courtroom was no longer in control. Officer Daniels jumped to his feet. His face was pale, his jaw trembling, stared at the woman as though seeing her for the first time. His lips stammered. You're the judge. The woman turned her calm gaze toward him. And yet, you placed me in chains, she said. Softly his knees buckled. He almost fell back into the bench, but his hands caught the edge just in time. His eyes darted around the room, desperate for support. But no one would meet his gaze. The prosecutor still knelt on the ground, clutching. His throat, his voice stolen. He looked up at her with horror in his eyes, his pride broken, his power gone. The woman took a slow step forward. The chains clinked with each movement, but they no longer seemed to weigh her down. They sounded instead like warning bells, each one striking fear into the hearts of those watching. The crowd slowly fell quiet again, silenced not by the gavel, not by authority, but by her presence. She stopped in the center of the room and raised her chin. Her voice, steady and commanding, filled the chamber. Today, you tried to judge me, she said. But the truth is this sigh was meant to judge you. The words fell heavy, striking every ear, every heart. The jury gasped. Some leaned back. Others covered their mouths. The crowd stared in disbelief, struggling to process what they were hearing. The judge's hands shook so violently that the papers slipped from his desk and scattered on the floor. He clutched the arms of his chair, as though it was the only thing keeping him upright. Officer Daniels shook his head. No, this can't be real. His voice cracked, his knees weak. The woman looked at him again, her calm eyes piercing. Do you think the chains make me less? She asked. Do you think the silence hides the truth? I had no answer. His lips moved, but no words came. The crowd murmured again, the sound restless, fearful, desperate. Is she telling the truth? How could this happen? Oh, why would they chain their own judge? The woman raised her bound hands. The iron glinted under the light. The sound of the links echoing softly. You chained me, she said. Her voice steady, her tone almost sorrowful. Because the truth scared you. But no chain can hide it, and no fear can bury it. Word struck like lightning. The crowd fell silent again, staring at her, waiting for what she would say next. The judge finally whispered, his voice breaking. What? What do you want? The woman's faint smile returned. She looked at him, her eyes calm, her posture tall, her chains rattling softly as she took another step forward. What I want, she said slowly. The jury leaned forward. The prosecutor's eyes widened in horror, and Officer Daniels dropped to his knees. The room was frozen. The judge sat trembling, his lips pale. The prosecutor still knelt on the ground, clutching his throat, his eyes wide. With shame and fear, Officer Daniels was on his knees, unable to rise, his strength broken. The jury stared in horror, their faces pale, their hands gripping the rail in front of them, and the woman stood tall in the center, her chains rattling softly, her calm gaze sweeping across the chamber. You came here today expecting to see judgment, she said softly, her voice carrying across the room like a steady flame. But you thought it would fall on me. You thought I was the one to be condemned. The crowd shifted uneasily. No one spoke. No one dared. Her voice deepened slightly, firm and sharp. But today you will face your own truth. Today you will be judged. The words echoed against the walls, heavy, final. The crowd gasped, some covering their mouths, some gripping their chairs tighter. The silence that followed was louder than any sound they had heard. The judge whispered, his voice shaking. No, this is madness. This cannot happen here. I am the judge. I hold the gavel. She turned her eyes toward him. He froze instantly. His words cut off as though sliced from his tongue. You, she said softly, her eyes steady on him. You think the gavel makes you a judge? You think the robe makes you pure? Then tell them what you've hidden beneath it. Gasps filled the air again. The judge's face turned white. His hands clutched the edge of his chair, his knuckles pale, his breathing fast. The jury looked at him in shock. The crowd leaned forward. Even Officer Daniels, on his knees, lifted his head slowly to see what she meant. The judge shook his head. His lips trembled. I don't know what you mean. Her eyes never wavered. Yes, you do. His eyes darted across the room. He wanted to deny it again, but the weight of her gaze pressed down on him. He stammered, sweat dripping from his forehead. It was only once. It wasn't supposed to happen. The crowd gasped again. What wasn't supposed to happen? Someone shouted from the back. The judge shook his head violently. His hands covered his face. His voice cracked. I took money. I betrayed the court. The words struck like thunder. The courtroom roared. He took bribes. The judge. This whole court is a lie. The sound was deafening, but the woman's calm gaze silenced them again. She raised her chained hands slightly, and the room quieted like children before a teacher. The judge lowered his head, shame written all over his face. His robe, once a symbol of power, now looked like a mask torn away. The woman's voice softened, but it carried no mercy. Your chain is not made of iron, it is made of greed, and it has bound you for years. The judge sobbed quietly, his body shaking. The woman turned her head slowly, her eyes sweeping across the jury box. 12 men and women sat there, pale and silent. Her eyes locked onto one of them, a man in a dark suit. His hands clenched tightly. You, she said. The man froze. His eyes darted nervously. Mem. She nodded. Stand. He hesitated, but the weight of her words forced him up. His legs shook. He swallowed hard. Her voice remained steady. Tell them what you did. He shook his head rapidly. I don't know what you're talking about. Her eyes narrowed, but her voice remained calm. Do you want me to tell them instead? His lips parted. His body shook. He tried to deny it again, but his voice broke. I lied. I lied in another trial. I sent an innocent man to prison because it was easier than standing against power. The crowd erupted again. You lied. You ruined a life. This court is cursed. The man sank back into his seat, covering his face with his hands. The woman's voice echoed again. Chains of cowardice. Chains of silence. Do you feel their weight now? The man sobbed. The jury sat in shock, each one of them trembling, as though her eyes might turn to them next, and then she turned back to Officer Daniels. He froze, his eyes widening. His knees pressed harder into the ground. His lips trembled. She spoke his name again. Daniels. Yes. Breath caught. Please. Don't. The room leaned closer, every eye fixed on him. Tell them, she said softly. Tears filled his eyes. His lips opened, but his voice cracked. Her eyes did not leave him. Finally, the words spilled out. I used my badge for fear. I hurt people who had no power. I thought it made me strong, but I was weak. The crowd gasped. Some shouted in anger, others in disgust. The woman's voice was calm, almost sorrowful. Those chains. Daniels, do you feel them now? Bowed his head, tears rolling down his face. Yes, he whispered. The room was silent again, but the silence was heavier than ever. Every heart pounded, every soul trembled. The woman raised her head. Her eyes swept across the entire courtroom, judge, jury, prosecutor, cop, and crowd. You chained me in iron, she said, her voice strong. But I am not the prisoner.
You are?
The words fell like thunder, shaking every corner of the room. The crowd sat in stunned silence, unable to breathe, unable to speak, and then slowly she lifted her bound hands high. The chains rattled, the iron glinted under the lights. With a voice that cut through the silence, she spoke, Now, it is time for the real trial to begin. The crowd gasped. The judge lifted his head in fear. The prosecutor crawled back in panic. And Officer Daniels wept into his hands, and the woman took her first step toward the bench. The sound of her chains echoed in the courtroom as she walked forward. Each step steady, unhurried, unstoppable. The judge's chair loomed above the room high, polished, powerful. It had always been the symbol of authority, the seat of final judgment. Every man and woman in that chamber had looked at it with awe and fear. Now, all eyes watched as the woman in chains approached it. The judge sat frozen, his body shaking. His gavel lay shattered on the floor. His robe hung heavy on his shoulders. His lips trembled as he whispered, This seat is mine." The woman stopped in front of him, raising her calm eyes to meet his. "No," she said softly. "It never was." The crowd gasped. The judge's hands gripped the arms of his chair tightly, his knuckles white.
Ow.
His chest rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths. His voice cracked. I earned this seat. I swore an oath. Cannot her chains rattled as she lifted her bound hands. Your oath was broken the moment you took bribes. This chair was never yours. It belongs to justice. And today, justice has come. The judge's body trembled violently. He shook his head like a child refusing to face the truth. No, no, I am the judge. His voice grew weaker. The woman stepped closer, her presence towering, though. She was bound. Her calm voice struck him harder than any weapon. "You are not the judge," she whispered. "You are the accused." Gasps spread through the courtroom like a wave. The judge's eyes widened in horror. His hands slipped from the arms of the chair. His body sagged as though her words had stolen the strength from him. And then slowly he stood. His legs shook, his shoulders hunched. He stepped aside, unable to meet her eyes, unable to fight. The room was silent, breathless. The woman turned, her chains clinking softly, and placed her hands on the arms of the chair. For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath, and then she sat. The courtroom exploded in gasps and cries. "She's sitting in the judge's chair. This is impossible. What kind of trial is this?" But as soon as she settled into the chair, the chaos died again. It was as though the chair itself recognized her. She did not look small in it, nor out of place. She looked as though she had always belonged there. Her calm eyes swept the room. Her voice, steady and clear, filled the chamber. "The trial begins. Now." The crowd fell silent instantly. The jury stared at her, pale and trembling. The prosecutor knelt on the ground, his lips moving silently, as though begging for mercy. Officer Daniels kept his head bowed, his tears dripping onto the floor, and the judge, the man who had just been dethroned, sank into the seat beside the desk, his face buried in his hands. The woman raised her chin, her voice echoing. "This court has long pretended to hold justice," she said. "But today, justice will finally be seen. One by one, the truth will be spoken." "I rise," landed on the prosecutor. "Stand," she commanded. He froze, shaking his head violently. "No, please, don't make me." Her voice sharpened. "Stand." His legs obeyed, trembling as though they were no longer his own. He rose slowly, his head bowed, his throat still raw from earlier. The crowd watched in silence. "Tell them," she said. His lips trembled. I... Her eyes did not move from him. Her voice pressed harder. "Tell them what you did." His chest rose and fell quickly. His hands shook. Finally, his words tumbled out, broken and desperate. "I destroyed evidence. I twisted words. I buried files. Because I wanted victories, not truth." The crowd gasped. "You lied to the court? You ruined lives for your own pride?" The prosecutor squeezed his eyes shut, tears streaming down his face. "I sent innocent men to prison. I knew it. I didn't care. I wanted to win. I wanted power. I wanted the glory of being the man who never..." The woman's voice cut through again, calm but sharp. "And what did it give you?" His body shook. His voice cracked. "Nothing. Nothing but shame." She leaned forward slightly in the chair. Your chains are pride and lies. They bound you more tightly than these irons ever bound me. And today, they are broken not by freedom, but by judgment. The prosecutor collapsed to his knees again, sobbing into his hands. The woman's eyes moved next to the jury. She studied them silently, her gaze piercing, until one woman middle-aged, with trembling hands, looked away, not able to meet her eyes. You, the woman in chains, said softly. Stand. The juror gasped, shaking her head. No, please. I can't. Stand. Her body moved against her will. Her legs carried her upward, though her face twisted with fear. Tell them, the woman commanded. The juror sobbed. I lied to protect myself. I sent a man to prison because I was afraid to speak against the police. I didn't want trouble. I didn't want to be the one who stood alone. The crowd roared again. You destroyed his life because of fear. You betrayed justice. The woman nodded slowly, her eyes steady. Fear is a chain as heavy as iron, and you wore it proudly. The juror broke down, covering her face in shame. The woman's gaze moved again, searching the room, piercing every soul. People bowed their heads, praying her eyes would not stop on them. Her voice filled the chamber. Every person here wears chains, some of greed, some of fear, some of pride. You believed I was the prisoner, but no, it is you. Chains will be shown. The air thickened. The crowd sat frozen, hearts pounding, waiting then. Suddenly the great wooden doors at the back of the courtroom creaked open. The sound echoed like thunder. Everyone turned their heads. A tall figure stepped inside, cloaked in shadows, their face hidden. Their steps were slow, steady, deliberate. The woman in the judge's chair lifted her head. For the first time, her calm eyes flickered with recognition. The crowd gasped. Who is that? What's happening now? The figure walked forward, the sound of their footsteps shaking the silence, and the woman in chains whispered, almost to herself, So, you've come. The heavy wooden doors groaned louder as they closed behind the figure. The sound echoed like thunder rolling through the chamber. Every head turned, every whisper died. The figure walked slowly down the aisle, their shoes tapping against the floor. They were tall, wrapped in a long dark coat, their face shadowed beneath the brim of a wide hat. The courtroom held its breath. The judge, now dethroned, lifted his head, his eyes widening. The prosecutor froze mid-sob. The jurors clutched the rail in front of them, their knuckles white. Officer Daniels wiped his face and stared in shock, and the woman in the judge's chair, calm until now, leaned forward slightly. For the first time since entering this courtroom, her eyes showed something other than serenity. Recognition. The figure stopped in the middle of the room. They tilted their head up slowly, letting the light touch their face. Gasps spread like fire. It was another woman, older, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes sharp as blades. Her presence alone seemed to shake the air, commanding silence without a word. The younger woman in chains whispered, so soft only the silence carried it, Mother. The crowd erupted in shock. Her mother? Who is she? Wait. Happening here? The older woman's gaze moved around the chamber slowly, sweeping across every trembling soul. When her eyes landed on the judge, he looked away instantly, shame twisting his face. When her eyes reached the prosecutor, dropped his head to the ground. When they reached Officer Daniels, he flinched and lowered himself even further. Finally, her eyes met her daughter's, the younger woman seated in the judge's chair. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence grew heavy, pressing on every chest. Then the older woman's voice broke the air. It was low, calm, but carried power like thunder hidden in the clouds. So, you began without me? Crowd gasped again. The younger woman's chains rattled softly as she shifted in the chair. They needed to see the truth, she replied. Her voice was steady, but softer than before. The older woman nodded once, her eyes never leaving her, and now they will see all of it. Room trembled with whispers. Who are they? What does this mean? Why is she calling her mother? The older woman stepped closer. Her heels struck the floor in sharp rhythm, each sound echoing through the chamber. She stopped before the bench, her presence towering though she stood below. The younger woman leaned forward slightly.
Are you here?
The older woman's lips curved faintly, not into a smile, but into something sharper, heavier. "Because judgment is not yours alone," she said. The crowd gasped. Again, the younger woman's calm eyes flickered. "You came to stop me?" The older woman shook her head. "No, I came to finish what you started." The silence that followed was so deep it rang in the ears. The judge finally found his voice, though it shook like a leaf in the wind. This is madness. Who are you people?" The older woman turned her gaze toward him. Her eyes pinned him like a blade. "You still pretend you do not know me," she said quietly. His lips parted, his face paled. It can't be it." But the look in his eyes revealed the truth. He knew exactly who she was. The prosecutor gasped softly, covering his mouth. His knees shook harder. He, too, knew. The jurors whispered frantically, confused and terrified. The crowd buzzed like a hive of bees, unable to sit still, desperate for answers. Officer Daniels swallowed hard. His voice cracked as he whispered to the woman in chains. Who is she?" The younger woman didn't turn her head. Her eyes stayed locked on her mother. Her voice was low but steady. "She's the one who built this court, the one who gave them their power, and the one who has betrayed the most." Gasps tore through the crowd again. The judge buried his face in his hands. The prosecutor shook violently. The jurors sat frozen. The older woman's eyes glowed with something deeper than anger. Her voice was sharp but calm. "You thought you could bury the truth. You thought time would hide it. But truth does not die, and today it has risen." The crowd roared again. "She built the court. Then why is she here now? What betrayal is she talking about?" The younger woman in the judge's chair gripped the arms of the seat. Her chains rattled softly. "Mother, this is my trial. Let me finish it." The older woman's gaze softened just slightly. "It is not only yours, child. The chains were meant for me." The room froze. The younger woman's eyes widened. The crowd gasped so loudly the chamber shook. The judge cried out suddenly, unable to hold back. "Stop! Don't speak it! Don't tell them!" But it was too late. The older woman's voice rose, strong, clear, unshakable. "They chained my daughter to hide their betrayal of me." The courtroom exploded into chaos. People leaped from their seats. Shouts filled the air. The jurors covered, their mouths in shock. Officer Daniels buried his face in his hands. The prosecutor crawled backward in horror, and the dethroned judge screamed, his voice cracking, "Enough. Stop this at once." But no one listened, because for the first time, the truth had broken through. The mother stepped closer to the bench, her eyes locked on her daughter. Her voice lowered again, calm but filled with weight. "Now they will see all of it. Now the judgment will be complete."
Right.
The younger woman's hands tightened on the arms of the chair. Her calm eyes flickered with fire, and the two women, mother and daughter, stared at one another in silence, the entire courtroom trembling between them. The crowd leaned forward, breathless, waiting, and then the older woman spoke one final sentence. "Child, you are not the only judge in this room." The courtroom was silent again, but not because order had been restored. It was the silence of fear, of hearts beating too fast, of lungs refusing to breathe. The mother's words still hung in the air like a blade. "You are not the only judge in this room." The daughter sat frozen in the chair, her chains heavy against her arms. The cold steel seemed to burn her skin, but her eyes never left her mother's. The dethroned judge trembled where he had fallen. His robes were crumpled, his face wet with sweat. His lips moved soundlessly, as if begging invisible powers to save him. The prosecutor shook his head wildly, whispering under his breath, No, it can't be. She was gone. She was gone." The jurors leaned forward, their fear mixing with curiosity. Their eyes darted between the two women, one in chains, one cloaked in power. Officer Daniels stood stiffly near the wall, his face pale, his hands twitching as though he wanted to draw his weapon but didn't dare. And the crowd, they sat on the edge of their seats, eyes wide, hearts pounding, waiting for the next word. The daughter finally broke the silence. Her voice was calm, but it carried a weight of sorrow. "Mother." "Why now?" The older woman's silver-streaked hair caught the light as she raised her head. Her eyes seemed sharper than steel. "Because the truth has rotted in this chamber long enough," she said. "Because they dared to chain you, thinking I would never return." The daughter lowered her gaze for a moment, her hands curling into fists against the armrests. "They feared you." The mother nodded slowly. "Yes, and fear makes men cruel. Fear makes them desperate." She turned her eyes toward the dethroned judge. He flinched under her gaze, his lips trembling. "You were the first to betray me," she said, her voice calm but The judge's face twisted. I did what I had to. We all did." "You don't understand?" Her voice sharpened. "I understand betrayal well enough." The judge's words broke off. His eyes filled with something close to terror. The mother looked away from him, back to her daughter. "They chained you because they saw me in you. The same blood, the same eyes. They thought binding you would erase me, but it only made you stronger." The daughter's eyes softened. For a moment, beneath her calm mask, something flickered: pain, longing, love. The crowd whispered frantically. Erase her? What did they do to the mother? Why was she betrayed? The prosecutor suddenly rose, his voice cracking. "This is madness. None of this belongs in a courtroom. She has no authority here." The mother's gaze snapped to him. The force of her stare silenced him instantly. He stumbled back, nearly falling over his chair. "No authority?" Her voice was quiet, but it struck harder than any shout. "Do speak of authority in a hall I built with my own hands. Every stone of this place remembers my judgment. Every oath you swore began with my name." The prosecutor's lips quivered. That was years ago. You vanished. I was erased," she corrected coldly. "Not vanished. Erased by men too afraid to face the truth." Her words cracked across the room like thunder. The crowd erupted again. "She built the court. Erased? By who? What truth is she talking about?" Officer Daniels pressed his hand to his forehead, whispering to himself. The weight of what he was hearing was too much. He looked at the woman in chains, then at her mother, then back again. The daughter spoke softly, her eyes searching her mother's. "If you were erased, why am I here? Why did they chain me?" The mother stepped closer, her coat sweeping behind her. She stopped at the base of the judge's bench, looking up at her daughter. "Because you are proof," she said. "Proof they could not bury me completely. Proof the truth still breathes." The daughter's lips parted slightly. Her calm mask trembled. The older woman's voice dropped lower, sharp as a knife. "And because they fear what will happen when the world knows what they did to us." The crowd gasped. The judge screamed suddenly, his voice raw. "Silence her. Somebody silence her." But no one moved. Not the officers, not the jurors, not the spectators, because no one dared. The mother slowly turned her eyes to him again. "Do you think chains or threats can silence me now?" "No, Judge, only truth will." He shook his head wildly, covering his ears like a child. "Oh no, I will not listen." But the truth had already begun to seep into the walls, to the hearts of everyone present. The daughter in the judge's chair leaned forward. Her chains rattled softly. "Tell them, mother. Tell them everything."
The older woman's lips
curved into something like sorrow. "If I speak, child, there is no going back. Once they hear it, the world will never see you the same again." The daughter's calm eyes blazed. "Then let them see." The mother studied her daughter for a long, heavy moment. Then she turned to the crowd. "You want to know why this woman was chained? You want to know who she truly is? Then listen." The crowd leaned forward, breathless. The mother raised her hand and pointed not to her daughter, but to the dethroned judge trembling on the floor. "She wears those chains because he is afraid." afraid of what she carries, afraid of what she is, afraid of the blood that runs in her veins. The judge's face crumpled. Don't say it, please. Annette, her voice rose, strong and unshakable. She is not the accused. She is not the criminal. She is the heir of the judgment they tried to destroy. The room erupted like a storm. People shouted, chairs scraped, voices clashed in chaos. Heir? The heir of judgment? What does that mean? The jurors looked at one another, stunned. Officer Daniels froze, his jaw dropping. The prosecutor buried his face in his hands, and the younger woman still seated in the judge's chair. Still Chain sat taller than ever. Her calm eyes shone with a new fire. But before anyone could ask more, the mother raised her voice again, cutting through the noise. And tonight, she declared, her voice shaking the chamber walls, you will all see what true judgment looks like. The crowd froze. The judge screamed again, his voice breaking. Stop her. Stop her now, before it's too late. But no one moved, because no one dared. The mother and daughter locked eyes once more. The chains rattled softly as the younger woman's lips curved into the faintest, calmest smile. The room leaned forward, breathless, waiting for the next revelation. And then the mother spoke one final sentence. She was never meant to stand trial. She was meant to take the seat you stole. The air in the courtroom felt heavier than stone. Every word spoken by the mother seemed to echo through the walls, shaking the foundation of the chamber itself. She was never meant to stand trial, the mother had said. She was meant to take the seat you stole. The crowd had erupted. People whispered, cried out, clutched each other's arms. The sound was wild, half disbelief, half terror, and yet, in the eye of the storm, two women stood unshaken, the daughter chained but calm in the judge's chair. The mother, tall and sharp as a blade, staring down the trembling men who once betrayed her. The dethroned judge crawled backward on the floor, his fingers clutching the wood as though it could save him. His face was pale, his eyes frantic. No, he whispered hoarsely. No, not this. It cannot come back. It was buried. It was finished. The mother's gaze cut through him like a sword. Nothing buried in lies is ever finished. The prosecutor staggered forward, his legs weak. He pointed a trembling finger at the daughter. She cannot be the heir. She was born after. She does not have the right. The mother's voice rose, sharp and commanding. Her blood gives her the right. Her very breath gives her the right. She carries what you tried to erase, and no chain, no lie, no stolen seat can take it from her. The prosecutor's face twisted with desperation. Then why was she brought here as a criminal? The mother's eyes burned. Because you feared what she might become if the world knew. You wrapped her in chains, hoping to shame her, to make her look guilty, to silence her before her voice could rise. The crowd gasped. She was never guilty. They framed her. All of this to keep her down? The jurors sat frozen in their seats. Some of them began to tremble, their eyes darting between the dethroned judge and the mother. One of them whispered shakily, Is this true? The judge slammed his fist against the floor, shouting, Silence! None of this matters. She is dangerous. She must be punished before it's too late. But his voice cracked, and his words only made him look weaker. The daughter finally spoke. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the room with perfect clarity. Tell them, mother. Tell them what they did to you. The crowd hushed instantly. The mother drew in a slow breath, then looked out over the chamber. Her eyes scanned the faces, some angry, some terrified, some desperate for answers. They betrayed me, she began, her voice heavy with memory. Years ago, this court was mine. I stood where she sits now. My word was law. My judgment was feared and respected. I swore to protect truth, no matter how dark, no matter how costly. Its weight. But truth is heavy, and some men cannot bear it. They whispered against me in the shadows. They twisted the law, poisoned people's ears, and one by one, they stripped away my power. They told the world I was unfit. They painted me as dangerous. And then her voice faltered for the first time. Her eyes grew dark with old pain. Then they erased me. My name, my rulings, my legacy. They replaced me with him. She pointed directly at the judge on the floor. Gasps spread through the courtroom. The judge's face turned red with rage. Lies. All lies. You were cast out because you were corrupt, because you abused your seat. But the mother's voice cut across his like steel. No, I was cast out because I refused to bow to you, because I refused to protect your crimes. The judge's mouth snapped shut. His eyes darted wildly. The crowd murmured louder. What crimes? What did he do? Is this why she was erased? The daughter's calm eyes flickered with fire. They betrayed you. And now they betray me. The mother nodded slowly. Yes, child, they thought removing me would end it. But when you rose, they saw me in you. And fear returned. The chains rattled as the daughter lifted her hand slightly. So they bound me to silence me, as they tried to silence you. Words struck the crowd like lightning. The jurors exchanged horrified looks. Officer Daniels shook his head, whispering under his breath, all this time, we were part of a lie. The prosecutor shouted desperately, his voice cracking, this is madness. She's twisting the truth. You cannot believe her. The mother turned on him, her eyes blazing. You know it is not madness. You stood beside him when he erased me. You signed the false papers. You swore the false oaths. The prosecutor stumbled back, nearly falling to his knees. He was part of it? They all lied. Everything we believed was false. The mother raised her hand, her voice sharp. Yes, they buried the truth to protect themselves. But truth does not stay buried. It breathes. It waits. And tonight it speaks again. The crowd roared, some crying out in outrage, others in fear. The judge screamed, his voice breaking into madness. No, she cannot rise again. She cannot reclaim what I took. She has no right. The mother's voice rose like thunder. She has every right because she is my blood, because she carries my judgment. Because every soul in this chamber knows, whether they admit it or not, that her chains are not justice. They are fear. The jurors sat stunned, their faces pale. The prosecutor sank into his chair, trembling. Officer Daniels covered his face with his hands, and the daughter sat taller in the judge's chair. The chains heavy, but her presence unbroken. The crowd fell silent again, waiting. The mother stepped closer to the bench, her voice dropping lower. Child, tonight is not just your trial. It is theirs. Gasps rippled through the room. Their trial? What does she mean? Whose trial? The daughter leaned forward, her calm voice steady. Then call them to account, mother. Let them answer for what they did. The mother's eyes glowed. With fire, yes. Tonight the liars will stand where they tried to put you. Tonight the betrayers will face their own judgment. The judge screamed, scrambling backward like a cornered animal. The prosecutor covered his ears. The jurors sat frozen, too afraid to move, and the crowd, all of them, held their breath, waiting for what came next. The daughter's chains rattled softly as she lifted her head high, and the mother spoke. The words that made the air in the courtroom crack like glass. Bring them forward. The true trial begins now. The mother's words struck the courtroom like a hammer. Bring them forward. The true trial begins now. The silence that followed was sharper than any scream. The crowd stared in shock. Jurors clutched the rail. In front of them, frozen between fear and disbelief. The prosecutor sat hunched in his chair, trembling like a child caught stealing, and the dethroned judge sweat. Dripping down his face, clawed at the floor as though he could dig his way out, Officer Daniels stood stiff as stone. His eyes darted between the chained daughter on the bench and the silver-haired mother who now commanded the room. His training screamed at him to act, but his heart told him not to move. The daughter spoke softly, her calm voice cutting the silence. Mother, who will call them? The older woman's eyes narrowed. I will. She turned slowly, her coat sweeping behind her, her presence heavy as a storm cloud. She raised her arm and pointed first at the judge. "You," she said. Her voice rang like iron. "The one who sat in my chair after stealing it. You will stand where you tried to place her." The judge's eyes widened. "No, you cannot judge me. I am the judge." The mother's words cut him like a blade. "You were. No longer. Tonight, the seat you stole rejects you." The crowd gasped. The judge tried to rise, but his legs buckled beneath him. He fell back to the floor, his body shaking. Next, the mother's eyes slid to the prosecutor. Her gaze pierced him, and he flinched as if struck. "And you," she said. "You signed the lies. You sharpened the blade against the innocent. You fed the fire that burned truth. You will answer as well." The prosecutor whimpered. "I only did what I was told," her voice thundered. "And you enjoyed it?" His knees collapsed, and he fell forward, clutching the floor. His sobs shook the chamber. The jurors watched in terror. Some whispered frantic prayers. Others sat with pale faces, realizing their own silence had fed the lie. Then the mother turned her eyes toward them. "And you," she said coldly. "You who sat in judgment of others, but never questioned the lies handed to you. You who nodded and obeyed, you too carry guilt." One juror gasped, shaking their head violently. "No, we only followed orders. We didn't know." The mother's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Ignorance does not wash away blood. To close your eyes is to choose blindness." The jurors lowered their heads in shame. The crowd whispered louder and louder. "They are on trial? The judge himself? What kind of trial is this?" The daughter sat taller in the seat, her chains heavy, but her presence unbroken. Her calm eyes met her mother's. "And who will judge them?" The older woman's lips curved faintly. "We will," the judge screamed, his voice breaking. "This is not law. This is madness. She cannot do this." The mother looked at him with fire in her eyes. "This is not your law. This is truth, and truth has no chains." The judge stumbled backward, clawing at his robe. "It will destroy everything. This court will crumble." The daughter's voice rang out calmly. "Then let it crumble if it cannot hold truth." The crowd erupted again. Some shouted in agreement, others cried out in fear. The walls seemed to shake with the storm of voices. Officer Daniels finally moved. He stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Madam, if this is to be a trial, then who speaks for them? Who defends them?" The mother's eyes turned to him. For a moment he thought she might cut him down with a single glance. But then, to his shock, her voice softened. "You asked the right question." The daughter leaned forward, her calm gaze on the officer. "Do you offer yourself, Daniels?" The room froze. The officer's mouth went dry. He looked around at the trembling judge, at the weeping prosecutor, at the terrified jurors, and at the crowd that hung on every word. His hand trembled at his side. I don't." He stammered. The mother stepped closer. Her eyes bore into him. "You have seen their lies. You have heard their betrayal, but you still carry duty in your chest. If you dare speak for them, then stand." The officer's chest rose and fell. His heart hammered. Sweat slid down his brow. Slowly, hesitantly, he stepped forward. His boots echoed on the floor. "I will speak," he whispered. The crowd gasped. The judge snarled. "You traitor! You stand with them, not with me." Officer Daniels turned his head slowly toward him. His voice was firmer now. "I stand with justice. And if justice means hearing your defense, then I will speak it." The daughter's calm lips curved faintly, almost into a smile. "Then let it be so." The mother nodded once. "So be it. Tonight the betrayers will stand accused. They will answer." The crowd buzzed like a storm. The judge clawed at his robe, his eyes wild. "This is not justice, it's vengeance." The mother's eyes pierced him. "Oh, vengeance is blind. But truth sees." The daughter's voice rang out, calm and unshakable. "The trial begins." The room fell silent again, trembling with fear and anticipation. And then The first time, the judge, the prosecutor, and the jurors stood not as judges, not as accusers, but as the accused themselves. The courtroom no longer felt like a courtroom, it felt like a battlefield. The daughter sat in the judge's chair, her wrists still bound in heavy chains. Yet somehow the chains no longer made her look weak. They made her look powerful, like a warrior carrying scars that proved her strength. Her mother stood tall in the center of the chamber, her silver hair catching the dim light. Every word she spoke seemed to shape the air, commanding all who listened. The judge, the prosecutor, and the jurors once feared, once obeyed, now stood trembling, facing the seat they had stolen. And Officer Daniels, his heart pounding like a drum, stepped forward to take a place no one expected him to. He would speak for the accused. The crowd sat frozen, afraid to even breathe. Some leaned forward with hungry eyes, desperate for truth. Others clutched their hands together in fear, afraid of what truths might be revealed. The daughter's calm voice broke the silence. This trial is different. No walls will protect. Lies here. Every mask will fall. The judge spat on the floor, his face red with rage. This is no trial. It is a mockery. You can't put me on trial in my own court. The mother's eyes burned into him. It was never your court. It was mine. The judge staggered back as if struck. The prosecutor clutched his robes tightly, his body trembling. Please, please let us go. I only followed orders. I never wanted this. The daughter's calm gaze fell on him. You followed lies. You signed them into law. You turned silence into guilt. That was your choice. The jurors whispered among themselves, some crying softly, others covering their faces. The mother raised her hand, silencing them all. The truth must be spoken. The first charge is betrayal. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The daughter leaned forward, her chains rattling softly. Then speak it, mother. Let them hear what they did. The mother turned to the judge. You betrayed the oath. You swore to protect justice, to guard truth. Instead, you buried it. You erased my name. You turned this chamber into a throne for lies. The judge's lips trembled. He pointed a shaking finger at her. You were dangerous. You were too strong, too feared. I saved this court from you. The mother's voice struck him like thunder. You did not save it. You poisoned it. You feared me because I refused to hide your crimes. The crowd erupted with whispers. Crimes? What crimes? Did the judge commit them himself? Is this why he betrayed her? The judge shook his head violently, sweat flying from his brow. The daughter's calm eyes locked on him. Then let us see what kind of order demands chains on the innocent. The crowd murmured louder. Some stood, others leaned closer, unable to look away. The mother's voice rang out again. The second charge is corruption. The prosecutor gasped, stumbling backward. No, not me. I only did what I was told. The mother's eyes blazed. You forged papers. You wrote false charges. You destroyed lives because it was easier than resisting. That is corruption. The prosecutor fell to his knees, his face pale, his lips trembling. I didn't know what else to do. The daughter's calm voice answered him. You knew, but you chose the safer road. Sin safety, when built on lies, is still sin. The prosecutor broke into sobs. His body shook violently, his hands clawing at the floor. The crowd gasped again, some horrified, some nodding with grim recognition. The mother turned slowly toward the jurors. Her gaze swept over them one by one. Her eyes fell to the ground, unable to meet hers. The third charge, she said softly, is silence. The jurors froze, their faces pale. You sat in judgment of others, the mother continued, her voice heavy. Yet you never judged yourselves. You obeyed. You nodded. You sentenced the innocent because it was easier than asking questions. And in your silence you became accomplices. One juror began to cry, covering their face. Another whispered, we didn't know. We didn't. No. The daughter's voice was calm but firm. You didn't want to know. The words struck the jurors like knives. Their shoulders hunched. Their lips trembled. The courtroom filled with whispers, gasps, cries. The crowd felt the weight of every word, and then the mother turned to Officer Daniels. "You are their voice," she said. "Speak and let them be heard." Daniels swallowed hard. His chest rose and fell. He looked at the trembling judge, the sobbing prosecutor, the broken jurors. Then he looked at the mother and finally at the chained daughter. His voice shook. They say they were afraid. They say they did what they had to do to survive." The daughter tilted her head slightly. "And what do you say, Daniels? Do you believe them?" The officer froze. His lips trembled. His eyes darted between the guilty and the betrayed. Sweat slid down his brow. Finally, his voice cracked. I don't know." The crowd gasped. The daughter's calm gaze did not waver. The mother's voice was sharp, then looked deeper. "Fear explains nothing. Fear is no shield from judgment." Daniels's heart pounded in his ears. He wanted to run. He wanted to disappear. But the weight of their eyes held him in place. He whispered, "Then what defense do they have?" The daughter leaned forward, her chains rattling softly. Her calm eyes pierced him. "Let them speak for themselves." The crowd gasped again. The judge's face twisted in rage. "You dare put me on trial? I will not answer to you." The prosecutor shook violently, tears streaming down his face. "Please, please, I only wanted to survive." The jurors whispered frantically, some begging for mercy, others denying their guilt. The chamber erupted into chaos again, voices clashing, people shouting, the guilty crying, crowd roaring. And through it all, the daughter's calm voice rose above the storm. "Enough." The room froze instantly. Her eyes swept across the guilty, across the crowd, across every soul in the chamber. "You want defense? You want mercy? Then speak truth, not excuses, not fear. Truth." Her words echoed through the silence, and slowly, hesitantly. Judge opened his mouth. "I will speak," he whispered. The crowd gasped. His lips trembled. His eyes burned with both fear and rage. "But if I speak," he said, his voice cracking, "the truth will not only destroy me, it will destroy this court. It will destroy everything." The courtroom was silent. No one moved. No one breathed. The judge's words hung in the air like a storm cloud. "If I speak, the truth will not only destroy me, it will destroy this court. It will destroy everything." Gasps spread through the crowd. People leaned closer, hearts racing, desperate to hear what came next. The mother's sharp eyes did not waver. She stood still, her back straight, her voice calm. "Then speak. Let it all fall. Let the world see what was hidden." The judge's hand shook. His lips trembled. For the first time, the man who had once ruled this chamber with iron authority looked small like a shadow of the power he once held. He glanced at the prosecutor, at the jurors, at Officer Daniels. Their eyes pleaded with him. "Silence. Don't say it," the prosecutor whispered. His body was trembling, tears streaking his face. "If you say it, they'll come for us all." The judge shook his head violently. "They already have." The jurors gasped. One of them clutched their chest as if the weight of truth was already crushing them. The daughter leaned forward in the judge's chair. The chains around her wrists rattled softly, yet her voice was calm, steady, unshaken. "Then speak it now. Truth does not wait. Lies already rot the walls of this court." The judge closed his eyes for a moment, as though summoning the courage to open a locked door inside himself. When he opened them, his voice was hoarse but steady. "It began years ago," he said slowly. "Before you were dragged here in chains. Before even your mother was cast aside." The crowd held its breath. The judge swallowed hard. His hands gripped the edge of the bench. This court, this house of justice, it was never meant to serve the people. It was built to serve power, to protect the ones above us, the ones who remain unseen. Whispers rippled like waves through the room, the ones above us. Someone muttered, "What does he mean? Who is he talking about?" The mother's eyes narrowed. Her voice cut through the whispers. "Names. Speak them." The judge's face twisted with fear. His lips trembled. "I can't. If I speak their names, they will silence me before the words even leave my mouth." The daughter's voice was calm, unshaken. They already fear this moment. That is why they chained me. That is why they tried to bury you, mother. Because truth in the open cannot be stopped. The judge's breathing grew heavier. His eyes darted toward the grand doors of the courtroom, as though expecting dark figures to burst through at any moment. Finally, he whispered, "They called themselves the Council." The crowd erupted in gasps and shouts. The very name carried weight, as though everyone had heard whispers of it but never dared speak it aloud. One man in the gallery stood up, his face pale. "No, that's only a rumor, a ghost story." The judge shook his head violently. "No, they are real. They meet in secret. They write the laws. They decide the verdicts. They choose who rises and who falls. We are only their tools." The crowd roared in shock. Some shouted in anger, others in fear. The prosecutor collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. "Why did you say it? Why did you say it out loud?" The mother's eyes blazed. Her voice rang out like thunder. "Because it was the truth." The daughter's calm voice followed, soft but sharp. "So it was not justice that chained me. It was the council." The judge nodded, his face pale. His body shook as though a great weight had been lifted from him, even as another crushed him. "They feared you," he whispered, "both of you. They said you carried power that could not be controlled. They said if you remained free, their order would crumble. So they ordered me to destroy you." Mother's voice was low and heavy, and you obeyed. Tears filled the judge's eyes. I was afraid. I told myself I was protecting this court. I told myself it was necessary, but I knew it was only cowardice. The jurors began to whisper frantically among themselves. Some looked horrified, others terrified. We were part of it. One cried, "We only followed orders." Another shouted. The daughter's calm gaze silenced them. Silence is also a choice. You followed orders, but you also followed fear. That is how the council rules. The courtroom grew tense, suffocating. As if the walls themselves were listening, the judge leaned forward suddenly, his eyes desperate. "You don't understand. Speaking this truth puts us all in danger. Even now, they will know I betrayed them. Even now, they are watching." The crowd shivered, turning toward the great doors, half expecting them to burst open. Officer Daniels's voice finally cut through the tension. "Who are they? Where do they sit? Oh, where do they hide?" The judge's lips trembled. His voice dropped to a whisper. "They are everywhere. In the city, in the courts, in the government, they wear masks of respect. They smile as friends, but behind the mask they pull the strings." The crowd shuddered. Murmurs spread like fire. The mother's eyes sharpened, then unmasked them. The judge's face went pale. He looked at her, then at the daughter, then at the trembling prosecutor, then at the jurors. "If I speak their names," he whispered, "this room will not survive the night." Gasps, cries. Fear spread across every face in the gallery. The daughter leaned forward, her calm voice steady, powerful. "Then speak them anyway." The judge's body shook violently. Sweat poured down his face. His lips opened. And then boom. The doors of the courtroom slammed open with a force that shook the walls. Everyone turned, eyes wide with shock. Figures stepped through tall, cloaked in dark robes, their faces hidden behind masks. The crowd screamed. Some stumbled back, others froze in terror, the judge's face drained of all color. The doors shook as they slammed against the marble walls. The sound echoed like thunder, silencing the entire courtroom. Figures in dark robes entered slow, steady, unhurried. Their faces were hidden by masks of polished silver, each mask carved into a different expression, one smiling, one frowning, one blank, one scowling. The crowd gasped in terror. Some scrambled backward, pressing themselves against the wooden benches. Others clutched their mouths, afraid even to breathe. The judge stumbled backward, his voice trembling. They came faster than I thought. The prosecutor collapsed to the ground, covering his face. "We are finished." All of us are finished. The jurors huddled together, whispering frantic prayers, but the mother did not move. She stood tall in the center of the chamber, her silver hair glinting in the dim light. Her eyes, sharp as fire, locked on to the masked intruders. The daughter sat in the judge's chair, her chained hands resting calmly on the bench. Her gaze was steady, unflinching, as though she had been waiting for this moment. Officer Daniels swallowed hard. His hand twitched near his holster, but he did not draw his weapon. Against these figures, a gun seemed meaningless. The tallest of the masked intruders stepped forward. His mask was carved into a wide, smiling face, mocking, cruel. His voice was deep, echoing through the chamber. This trial ends now. Gasps erupted from the gallery. The mother's voice cut through the fear like steel. No, this trial has only begun. The smiling mask tilted slightly. You speak boldly for someone who is cast aside. You should have remained forgotten. The daughter's calm voice broke in. Forgotten by you, perhaps, not by truth. The smiling mask let out a low laugh. Truth. His voice dripped with contempt. Truth belongs to those strong enough to hold it, and we hold it. The mother's eyes burned. No, you only bury it. But buried truth does not die, it waits. The crowd whispered, their courage flickering like a small flame. The blank-masked figure stepped forward, their voice flat, without emotion. You have broken the order. This chamber does not belong to you. The daughter's chains rattled softly as she leaned forward. Then who does it belong to? Two masks. Two shadows. To those who silence justice. The blank mask gave no answer. The judge suddenly fell to his knees, his voice desperate, shaking. Please, I kept your secrets. I obeyed. Do not punish me. Was loyal? The smiling mask turned his head slowly toward him. The silence was worse than any words. The judge's body shook violently. He crawled forward, his lips trembling. I did everything you asked. I destroyed her. I silenced her name. The scowling mask raised a gloved hand. The judge froze mid-sentence. His mouth opened, but no sound came. His body stiffened, his eyes wide with terror. The crowd gasped. Some screamed, and then the judge collapsed onto the floor, silent and still. The prosecutor let out a choked sob. The jurors covered their mouths, horrified. Officer Daniels' eyes widened in shock. He whispered, "They killed him," without even touching him. The smiling mask turned back toward the mother and daughter. This is the price of betrayal. Will you continue this performance? The mother's voice was sharp as a blade. This is no performance. This is judgment, when you will face it. The crowd gasped again. The daughter's calm voice followed. You fear truth? That is why you hide behind masks? But masks cannot protect you forever. The smiling mask tilted his head. You think you can judge us? The mother raised her hand, pointing at them. Her voice thundered. You already judged yourselves when you chained my daughter, when you silenced me, when you turned justice into a weapon. Your masks cannot hide guilt. The blank mask stepped forward again. Their voice was flat. Enough words. Counsel does not answer to the accused. You will be silenced again, and this time forever. Da! The scowling mask raised his hand toward the daughter. The chains on her wrists began to glow faintly, tightening around her skin. She winced in pain, but did not cry out. The crowd shouted in fear. Some begged for mercy. Others pressed against the walls, terrified to move. Officer Daniels took a step forward, his voice shaking. Stop. She's not your prisoner anymore. This is wrong. The smiling mask turned toward him. And what are you, officer? A dog who forgot its master? Daniels clenched his fists, his body trembling. But still, he did not step back. Maybe I was a dog once, but not anymore. The crowd gasped. For the first time, Daniels' voice carried strength. The daughter looked at him, her calm eyes softening. You chose truth, Daniels. Do not fear. Chains glowed brighter, tightening around her wrists. Her skin burned, but her gaze did not waver. The mother stepped forward, her voice rising like thunder. You think chains can bind her? You think masks can hide you? You've already lost? Because every whisper in this room has become truth. Two spreads faster than your fear. The smiling mask let out a harsh laugh. You speak as though you hold power. The mother's eyes blazed. I do. The lights in the courtroom flickered. The air grew heavy, charged, as though the very walls listened. The crowd froze. Eyes wide, hearts pounding. The daughter's chains trembled, the glowing metal cracking slightly. A faint sound filled the chamber, not of breaking, but of something. Ancient stirring, the masked figures stepped back, their composure slipping. The blank mask whispered, their flat voice now trembling. She should not have this strength, the smiling mask hissed. Break her before it's too late. The scowling mask raised his hand again, summoning a force that shook the chamber. But this time, the daughter lifted her chained hands. The metal glowed brighter, cracking more, pieces breaking away. The crowd cried out in shock. Officer Daniels shouted, "She's breaking free!" And then crash. The chains shattered into pieces, the sound echoing like thunder. The fragments scattered across the floor, glowing faintly before fading. The daughter stood tall, her wrists free at last. Her calm eyes burned with a quiet, stoppable power. The masked figures stepped back in fear. The smiling mask's voice cracked. No, this is impossible, the mother's voice thundered. No, this is justice. The sound of shattered chains still echoed through the courtroom. The pieces lay scattered across the marble floor, glowing faintly before fading into nothing. The daughter stood tall, no longer bound. Her wrists bore the marks of the chains, but her calm eyes shone, brighter than ever. She had endured what was meant to break her, and she was stronger for it. The crowd gasped, some rising to their feet. Whispers spread like fire. She broke the chains. That's impossible. No one has ever stood against the council. The masked figures, the council took a step back. The first time, they looked shaken. Their power had silenced judges, prosecutors, and jurors for years. But now, before everyone's eyes, their chains had failed. The smiling mask hissed, his voice sharp and cruel. You think this changes anything? You are still nothing compared to us. The mother stepped forward, her silver hair gleaming in the light. Her voice thundered. She is free, and no power of yours can bind her again. The blank mask raised their head, their voice flat but trembling. If she is truly free, then she is dangerous. More dangerous than her mother ever was. The scowling mask lifted his hand, a dark force swirling in his palm. The air grew heavy, pressing down on the crowd. People gasped, clutching their chests. But the daughter raised her own hand. Her calm voice carried through the chamber. No more fear. The swirling force dissolved into nothing, vanishing before it could be released. The scowling mask froze. His body trembled. What? What are you? The daughter's gaze did not waver. Not your prisoner. Not your tool. I am what you feared most, the truth you could not bury. The crowd erupted in gasps. Some shouted in awe, others in fear. Officer Daniels stepped forward, his voice shaking but strong. She isn't alone anymore. We all see it now. Hear it, you can't silence the truth. The prosecutor sobbed on the floor, his hands covering his face. It's over. It's all over. The jurors trembled, clinging to one another, their silence heavier than ever. The smiling mask let out a harsh laugh, though it rang hollow now. You think the truth will save you? Truth does not matter. Power decides who wins. The mother's voice struck like thunder. Then you are already defeated, because your power is fear, and fear is breaking. The crowd roared in agreement, their whispers turning into cries. For the first time, voices rose not in terror but in defiance. The daughter's calm gaze swept across the masked figures. You built this court on lies. You silenced those who stood against you. But today, the masks fall. The blank mask shook their head, voice trembling. You do not understand. If we fall, the order collapses. Chaos will consume everything. Daughter stepped down from the judge's chair, her bare feet echoing on the marble floor. Every step she took carried weight, as though history itself moved with her. Better chaos than chains, she said softly. The smiling mask snarled. Then, you have chosen war. At once, the four masked figures raised their hands. The air grew dark and heavy. The ground trembled. The candles flickered violently, their flames stretching unnaturally long. The crowd screamed. Some ran for the doors, only to find them sealed shut. Others fell to their knees, covering their faces. Officer Daniels shielded two trembling jurors, shouting, The masked figures' voices rang out together, deep and echoing. Unnatural. We are the council. We are the law. And we will not fall. But the mother and daughter stood side by side in the center of the storm. The mother raised her hand, her voice strong as steel. You are not the law. You are the lie. The daughter lifted her free hands, her voice calm, unshaken, and lies break. The ground split with a deafening crack. The great pillars of the courtroom trembled, dust raining from the ceiling. Oh, the walls groaned as though centuries of silence were waking at once. The masked figures staggered there. Formation breaking, the smiling mask shouted, Hold your ground! She cannot face us all. But the crowd was no longer silent. Voices rose from every corner. She is right, no more masks, no more chains. The council turned in shock as the very people they once silenced now shouted against them. Mother's voice rose above the cries. This is the end of your rule. This court no longer belongs to fire, it belongs to truth. The daughter's eyes blazed with calm fire. Unmask yourselves. The masked figures froze. The smiling mask laughed, but it wavered. You cannot make us. The daughter stepped forward, her voice cutting through his laugh. You will, because truth unmasks all. A strange sound filled the chamber, a sharp crack, like glass breaking. The crowd gasped as a fissure appeared down the smiling mask. It split slowly, painfully, until the mask shattered. Falling in pieces to the floor, the figure beneath gasped, clutching their face, their human skin revealed pale, aged, trembling. The crowd roared. Some screamed. Others cried out in fury. Blank mask cracked next, then the scowling one, then the last. One by one, the silver faces fell away, revealing ordinary men beneath men who had hidden behind masks of power, now stripped bare. The once mighty council stood trembling, no longer. Shadows no longer untouchable, just men. The mother's voice thundered. And this is who you feared? These are the ones who ruled you. Shh, no more. The crowd erupted, their cries shaking the chamber. Officer Daniels raised his fist. No more chains, no more lies. The jurors stood slowly, shame written on their faces. The prosecutors sobbed harder, knowing the masks had fallen. The councilmen stumbled backward, their power broken. Their eyes darted wildly, like trapped animals. But the smiling man, their leader, screamed in rage. This isn't the end. You don't know what waits outside these walls. We are not the only ones. He stopped suddenly, his voice choking. His eyes widened in terror. As though something or someone was watching him from beyond the courtroom, the mother's sharp eyes narrowed. What waits outside? The man's lips trembled. Sweat poured down his pale face. You think the council ends here? No. We are only the shadow of something greater. If you tear us down, they will come, and they will not show mercy. The crowd froze. Fear rippled again. The daughter's calm voice rose above the whispers. Then let them come. Her words echoed like thunder, filling the chamber with both fear and hope. The courtroom was in chaos. The masks of the council lay shattered on the floor, silver shards glinting like broken lies. The once feared rulers stood barefaced, trembling like guilty men exposed to the light. Their power, once unquestioned, had been stripped away before the eyes of all. But their leader, the man who had worn the smiling mask, still glared with fury. His lips trembled, his pale face dripping with sweat. "You fools," he spat, his voice cracking. "You think you've won? You think breaking our masks destroys us? We are only shadows. The true power waits outside, and when it comes, you will beg for chains again." "At!" the crowd gasped. Fear rippled through them once more. Some whispered, "What if he's right? What if worse is coming? Have we only awoken something greater?" The mother's voice rose above their fear, sharp as thunder. "Enough you have ruled. With fear long enough, your words are only another chain." The daughter stood tall beside her. Her wrists were scarred where the shackles had burned her skin, but her calm gaze was unshaken. "You said they will come," she said softly. "Then let them." Her words echoed like a bell, steady and clear. The council leader snarled. "You don't understand. They see everything. Even now, their eyes are on us. Cannot fight what? You cannot see." At that moment, the courtroom lights flickered. The air grew cold. The great doors trembled, as if struck by an unseen hand. Gasps spread through the gallery. Some covered their mouths. Others clutched their children close. A low, rumbling sound filled the chamber like distant thunder, or perhaps a voice too deep for human ears. The prosecutor fell to his knees, shaking violently. "They're here. Oh God, they're here." The jurors clung together, trembling. Officer Daniel stepped forward, his voice shaking but strong. "Then let them show themselves." The doors groaned louder, the wood cracking under invisible force. The mother raised her hand, her eyes blazing. "He cannot frighten us with shadows. If there is a greater power, let it stand before us. We will not bow." The doors burst open, but no cloaked figures entered this time. Instead, a rush of wind filled the chamber, swirling like a storm. The candles blew out, plunging the room into half-darkness. The broken masks on the floor rattled as if alive, and then shapes appeared. Not men, not women. Figures of shadow, taller than any human, their bodies twisting like smoke, their eyes burning like fire. The crowd screamed.
Ow.
Some fell to their knees. Others tried to flee only to find the walls themselves sealed tight. The councilmen collapsed in terror. The leader's face drained of all color. "They've come."
All.
He whispered. "The masters." The mother stood her ground, her silver hair whipping in the storm of wind. Her voice thundered. "Masters of fear, that is all you are." The daughter stepped forward, calm even as shadows loomed over her. "You are not unseen. You are not untouchable. You are only lies given shape." Shadows hissed, their voices echoing in 1,000 whispers. "We are the order. We are eternal. You are nothing." The daughter's calm voice cut through their hiss like a blade. "You ruled through silence, through fear, through chains. But today, the silence breaks." The shadows surged forward, their forms twisting, their burning eyes fixed on her. The crowd cried out. Officer Daniels shouted, "No." But the daughter raised her hands. Her chains were gone, but the scars remained in from those scars. The light began to glow. The shadows hissed louder, coiling as the glow grew brighter. The mother stepped beside her, her own hands raised. Her voice shook the chamber. Together. Light spread, filling the room, pushing against the darkness. The crowd shielded their eyes, some weeping, some shouting in awe. The shadows screamed. Their twisting forms writhed, shrinking back, unable to withstand the brilliance. The councilmen begged on the floor, their voices broken. "Forgive us, we only obeyed. Don't let them take us." But the mother's voice roared. "Chained the innocent. You silenced truth. You served shadows willingly. Now face the light you tried to bury." The daughter's calm voice rose, steady, unshaken. "No more masks, no more fear. The trial ends now." The light burst forth, a wave that swept through the courtroom. The shadows shrieked, their forms breaking apart, scattering like smoke in the wind. The sound was deafening, 1,000 cries fading into silence. The wind stilled, the candles flickered, back to life. The courtroom stood silent, bathed in calm light. The shadows were gone. The councilmen lay trembling on the floor, stripped of all power, their masks shattered. Their voices broken, the crowd slowly rose. Their faces filled not with fear, but with awe. Officer Daniels let out a shaky breath. His eyes wide, they're gone. It's over. The prosecutor sobbed quietly, covering his face. The jurors stood in silence, their shame heavy, but their fear gone. The mother lowered her hands, her silver hair falling around her shoulders. Her voice was steady. It is finished. The daughter stepped down from the judge's chair, walking to the center of the chamber. The chains were gone. The masks were broken. Shadows had vanished. She looked at the people, the ones who had whispered in fear, who had sat silent for too long. Her calm voice carried to every corner of the room. Justice does not belong to masks. It does not belong to shadows. It belongs to truth. And truth belongs to all of us. The crowd erupted in cries of joy, in tears, and shouts of freedom. Some knelt in gratitude. Others embraced one another. Officer Daniels stepped forward, his voice strong. You heard her? No more chains. No more silence. We start again today. The people roared in agreement. The councilmen cowered, powerless. Their reign ended. The mother placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Her voice softened. They tried to bury us, but we are still here. The daughter's calm eyes shone. And so is the truth. The crowd thundered with applause, their voices shaking the walls. The trial that had begun with chains